Honesty in relationships is like a mirror. It reflects us as we are, but can be shattered by the slightest blow. Who are we in the family, parents, children, partners, and how can we preserve ourselves without losing those we love? What if the truth hurts and lies become a refuge? And yet, among the fragments of mistakes and pain, is there room for forgiveness? Can a second chance become a bridge to a new life or just a shadow of the past? This story is about people who are looking for answers, balancing between their roles, desires, and hopes for redemption. Avery Lindstrom stood at the kitchen sink in their two-story home in Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood. Wet dishes slid under her hands, the soap suds smelled like lemon, and outside the window, the neighbor's dog barked at a passing bike. The living room echoed with the laughter of Liam, their 4-year-old son, who was building a tower of blocks and then gleefully destroying them. Avery glanced at her reflection in the glass. Her hair pulled back into a messy bun, her eyes darkly shadowed, her t-shirt stained with applesauce. She was 32, but she felt like she was 40. She dried her hands on a towel and glanced at Liam. His curly blonde hair bounced as he hummed something about dinosaurs. Avery smiled, but it quickly faded. The day had been like yesterday: breakfast, a walk in the park, lunch, games, dishes. Tomorrow will be the same. She loved Liam more than anything in the world, but the routine was like quicksand. She had once been a different person, a marketer who negotiated with clients, wore heels, and laughed at parties. Now her world had narrowed to this house, and she didn't know how to fix it. Avery opened the refrigerator to get the chicken for dinner. Kyle, her husband, was due home in a couple of hours. He was an architect at a firm that designed trendy offices in downtown Seattle. His career was on the rise, and he often talked about how proud he was to be able to provide for his family. But to Avery, his words were a hint. "Stay home. We have enough." She pulled out the bag of chicken, set it on the table, and sighed. Something had to change. "Mom, look." Liam ran up to her, holding a crooked tower of blocks. "It's a castle for a T-Rex." "Cool, kid." Avery crouched down to examine his creation. "Where's the T-Rex going to sleep?" "Right here." Liam pointed at the empty space between the cubes. "He's going to have a big bed." "That's a great idea." She patted his head. "Go ahead and build. I'm making dinner." Liam ran back into the living room, and Avery got out a cutting board. She was chopping onions when the memory came back to her. 5 years ago, she'd worked at a marketing firm, preparing presentations, traveling to meetings in Portland. Her boss had told her she could be a marketing director by the time she was 35. But then Liam was born, and she'd gone on maternity leave. At first, it had felt right she wanted to be there for her son. But now that Liam was older, the days seemed endless, and she felt like a shadow of the woman she'd once been. Kyle came home at 6:30. Avery heard the front door slam and Liam yell, "Daddy." She dried her hands and walked out into the hallway. Kyle, a tall man with short dark hair and a light stubble, scooped Liam up into his arms. "So, champ, how's your day?" Kyle smiled, looking at his son. "I built a castle." Liam pointed towards the living room. "Really? Will you show me?" Kyle set Liam down and took off his jacket. Then he turned to Avery. "Hey, honey." "Hi," she forced a smile. "Dinner's almost ready. Chicken and vegetables." "Sounds great." Kyle walked over, kissed her on the cheek, and headed into the living room to see Liam. Avery walked back into the kitchen, feeling a little annoyed. Kyle was a good husband and father, but his tendency to immediately turn on Liam the moment he walked in the door sometimes got under her skin. She wanted him to ask how his dinner had gone her day, although she knew that the answer would be the same: nothing special. They sat at a large wooden table for dinner, Liam swirling his spoon around his plate, smearing his fries, and Kyle talking about his new project, an office building with a green roof. "The client wants everything to be eco-friendly," Kyle said, cutting into a piece of chicken. "It's trendy, but it's damn complicated. We have to recalculate the entire budget." "That sounds like a challenge," Avery said, looking down at her plate. She was trying to process it, but her thoughts were in a swirl. "Yeah, but I can handle it," Kyle smiled. Liam, eat your vegetables, otherwise you won't grow big like me. Liam grimaced, and Avery couldn't help but laugh. But the tension was building inside her. She knew this was the right moment, but the words were stuck in her throat. Finally, she put her fork down. "Kyle, I want to talk," she said, trying to keep her voice even. He looked up, still chewing. "Sure. About what?" Avery looked at Liam, who was concentrating on building a tower of carrot pieces. "I'm thinking of going back to work." Kyle froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. "To work? Why?" "I can't stay home forever," Avery tried to sound calm. "Liam's grown up. He's in daycare half the day. I want to be myself again. But you already." Kyle frowned. "Ave, my income is enough for us. We don't need your salary." "It's not about the money," she said, feeling the irritation rise in her chest. "I don't feel alive, Kyle. I wash the dishes, I take Liam to daycare, I cook dinner. That's it. I'm losing myself." Kyle put his fork down and looked at her carefully. "You're not losing yourself. You're a mom. That's the most important thing. Liam needs you." "Liam needs a happy mom," Avery raised her voice, but quickly stopped when she noticed Liam looking at her. She took a deep breath. "I'm not asking for your permission. I'm just saying I need it." Kyle tapped his fingers on the table. "What about Liam? Who's going to pick him up from daycare? Or are you going to hire a nanny?" "We can talk about it." Avery tried to keep her composure. "There are a lot of options. I just want your support." "Supported in what?" Kyle shook his head. "Ave, I work 10 hours a day to make sure we have everything. Do you really think this is a good idea? Do you really think I should sit at home and make you soup for the rest of your life?" Avery felt tears welling up in her eyes. She stood up so Liam couldn't see her face. "I'm not your servant, Kyle." "I didn't say that. I didn't even think that." Kyle stood up too, but his voice was quieter. "I just want Liam to have a normal family, to have you by his side." "I'm already here," she turned to him, clenching her fists. "But I can't be just that. I want more." Liam suddenly whined, dropping a piece of carrot on the floor. Avery immediately sat down next to him. "It's okay, baby," she patted his head. "Eat, it's okay." Kyle looked at them, his face softening. "Let's talk about this later, okay? Without." He nodded at Liam. Avery nodded, but inside she was seething. She knew Kyle wouldn't give in that easily, but she wasn't going to back down either. After dinner, she put Liam to bed, reading him a dinosaur book until he fell asleep curled up under the covers. Kyle sat in the living room with his laptop, pretending to work. Avery walked past him without looking at him and went into the bedroom. Lying in the dark, she opened her laptop and started scanning job postings. One, at a marketing firm called Brightwave, seemed perfect, a part-time marketing manager position in a downtown office. Avery updated her resume, adding an old photo of herself in a business suit, smiling confidently. She applied without telling Kyle. It was her first move, and she didn't want him to stop her. That morning, while Kyle was at work and Liam was at daycare, Avery received an email from Brightwave. She was being asked to interview. She closed her laptop, her heart racing. This was a chance, not just for a job, but to feel alive again. Avery Lindstrom woke up before her alarm. Outside, Seattle was still engulfed in the morning fog, and her house was silent except for the ticking of the wall clock. Today was her first day at Brightwave, and a mixture of excitement and dread churned in her chest. She carefully slipped out from under the covers, careful not to wake Kyle, who was sleeping with his back to the wall. Their conversation after dinner last week had never happened. Kyle had avoided the topic, and Avery didn't want to start another argument. She'd simply told him she was interviewing, and when she'd been accepted, she'd told him, "I start Monday." Kyle just nodded, muttering something about Liam's schedule. Avery knew he wasn't thrilled, but that didn't stop her. She wanted to prove to him, to herself, to everyone that she could still be the woman who negotiated and closed deals. In the bathroom, Avery turned on the light and looked in the mirror. Her face was pale, and there were still shadows under her eyes, but she felt more alive than she had in 3 years. She opened her closet to find her new suit hanging there, a navy blazer and pants she'd bought on sale at Nordstrom. Avery ran her hand over the material, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. This wasn't just a suit, it was a ticket to another life. She applied her makeup carefully, a little foundation, mascara, a touch of lip gloss. She wore her hair in a neat low bun, the way she had worn it before maternity leave. When she buttoned her jacket and looked at herself, for the first time in a long time, she recognized the woman in the reflection. This wasn't a tired mom in a stained t-shirt, but Avery Lindstrom, ready to fight. "Mom, where are you going?" Liam, sleepy and wearing dinosaur pajamas, appeared in the bathroom doorway. Avery smiled and sat down next to him. "Going to work, baby. It's my first day." "Will you be home when I return from kindergarten?" His big blue eyes looked with concern. "Of course," she kissed his forehead. "I'll pick you up like usual and we'll play, okay?" Liam nodded, but still looked unsure. Avery felt a twinge of guilt, but pushed it aside. She wasn't going to sacrifice herself so Liam would never see her busy. Kyle woke up while she was making Liam some oatmeal. He walked into the kitchen in a t-shirt and sweatpants, rubbing his eyes. "You're early," he said, looking at her suit. "You look formal." "It's my first day," Avery said, pouring coffee into his favorite Seahawks mug. "I want to make an impression." Kyle took the mug, but his eyes were set. "Good luck. Just don't be late for Liam." "I won't be late," she tried to speak lightly, although his tone offended her. "I made arrangements with the nanny. She will pick him up if I'm late." Kyle nodded but said nothing. Avery felt the tension between them, but there was no time to talk. She kissed Liam, grabbed her bag, and ran out of the house. Brightwave's office was in downtown Seattle, a modern building with large windows. Avery stepped into the elevator, clutching the strap of her bag. Her heart was pounding as if she were about to take an exam. She was met at the office by the receptionist, a young woman named Kelsey, who led her into a conference room. The HR manager, a man in his 40s with a friendly smile, was already waiting. "Avery, good to see you," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Tom, your boss. Welcome to the team." "Thank you." Avery shook his hand, trying to hide her nervousness. "I'm glad to be here." Tom showed her around the office, an open space with brightly colored posters on the walls, a coffee machine in the corner, several people tapping away at keyboards. Avery inhaled the familiar smell of coffee and paper. This was her world, and she missed it more than she thought. "This is your seat," Tom pointed to the table by the window. "And this is Jason Keller. He'll help you get settled in." Jason, a tall guy with dark curls and an easy smile, stood up from the next table. "Hey, Avery, welcome to Chaos." He laughed, and she couldn't help but smile back. "I hope I can handle it," she said, putting her bag on a chair. "Oh, you'll definitely do it," Jason winked. "Just don't be scared by our deadlines." He showed her how their project management system worked and explained that her first task would be to prepare a presentation for the client, a coffee chain that wanted to update its branding. Avery nodded, writing everything down in her notebook. She liked the way Jason explained things, simply, with jokes, without unnecessary pomp. He was the kind of person who immediately puts you at ease. "Come on, I'll show you the best spot in the office," Jason said when Tom left. He led her to the coffee machine. "You won't survive without this miracle." "Seriously?" Avery laughed. "Coffee is sacred in my house." "Then you'll fit right in." Jason poured her an espresso. "How long have you been in marketing?" 5 years, but with a break." She took a sip. "The last 3 years I was, well, on maternity leave." "Wow, that's cool," Jason nodded. "My brother just became a dad, too. He says it's harder than any ad campaign." "That's true," Avery smiled, feeling the tension ease. Jason was easy to talk to, and it helped her relax. At lunchtime, he suggested going to the cafe across the street. "They have the best sandwiches in town," he said. Shall we go? Avery hesitated, but decided it was a good chance to get to know the team. The cafe was cozy, with wooden tables and the smell of freshly baked goods. They ordered turkey sandwiches and coffee, and Jason began to talk about the customers. Our main client is the coffee shop Bean and Brew, he said, biting into a sandwich. They want a new logo, but they're afraid to take risks. We need to convince them that we're not just drawing pictures, but creating history. I love challenges like this, Avery perked up. I once rebranded a small restaurant. We completely changed their style, and their revenue increased by 20%. Really? Jason raised his eyebrows. Then you're definitely our find. They chatted about work, their favorite Seattle coffee shops, the time Jason accidentally spilled a latte on a customer. Avery laughed so hard she almost spilled her coffee. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she belonged. Jason wasn't just a coworker, he was easy to be around, and that was what she loved. When she got home, Liam was already with the nanny, playing in the living room. Avery hugged him, listening to him talk about the new construction set at daycare. Kyle came in later, tired, but with a bottle of wine. So, how was the first day? He asked, putting the bottle on the table. Cool, Avery smiled, setting out the plates. The team is good, the projects are interesting. It's like I'm breathing again. That's good, Kyle nodded, but his voice was reserved. Was Liam acting okay? Yeah, he was with a nanny for a couple of hours. Avery poured the wine. It's all gone. Smoothly. Great. Kyle sat down at the table, but his eyes were distant. It's just, I'm worried about how we're going to organize all this. We'll manage, Avery tried to sound confident. I've already arranged for a nanny for 3 days a week. Everything is under control. Kyle nodded but didn't answer. Avery noticed he was looking at her differently, but chalked it up to exhaustion. She was too happy to bother picking at his mood. The first day had gone better than she could have dreamed, and she wasn't about to let that go. Avery Lindstrom sat at her desk in the Brightwave office, staring at her laptop screen. It had been a week since her first day on the job, and she was already getting into a rhythm. The presentation for Bean and Brew was almost done, and Avery was feeling on top of things. She was putting the finishing touches on the slides when Jason Keller peered over her shoulder. Not bad, Lindstrom, he said, leaning against the table. That headline font is fire. Where did you dig it up? Pinterest, Avery smiled, not looking up from her screen. There are tons of design ideas there. Just don't get stuck there for an hour. Ha, I know that feeling, Jason laughed. Hey, we have lunch in an hour. Want to go to that cafe? I'm treating you. Avery hesitated. She'd gone out to coffee with Jason twice already this week, and each time it had been a breath of fresh air. But Kyle had become increasingly quiet at home, and she didn't want to give him a reason to worry. How about we order something to the office, she suggested. No way, Jason shook his head. You deserve a proper break. Plus, their avocado sandwiches are a crime to miss. Avery laughed. Okay, you talked me into it. Just make it quick. She went back to work, but her mind was racing with Kyle. He hadn't said anything outright, but his questions about her day had become increasingly wary. Who did you have lunch with? He'd asked her yesterday when she'd mentioned the cafe. Avery had answered honestly, my coworker Jason, but Kyle had just nodded and changed the subject. She could tell he wasn't thrilled, but she didn't want to start an argument. At home, things were business as usual. Avery picked up Liam from daycare, cooked dinner, and played with him before bed. But now she stays at the office a couple of times a week, citing projects. Yesterday, she'd gone shopping after work and bought a new dress, a dark green one with a low-cut neckline that fit her perfectly. It's for the office, she told herself, but deep down she knew she just wanted to feel attractive. Kyle had noticed the dress when she tried it on at home and had merely chuckled. It's probably expensive. Not really, Avery replied, trying not to react to his tone. There's a dress code in the office. You have to look professional. Kyle didn't say anything, but his eyes said a lot. Avery felt the distance growing between them, but she didn't know how to close it. She wanted him to be happy for her, but instead he looked like she was doing something wrong. Avery relaxed in the cafe with Jason. They sat by the window, and sunlight fell on the wooden table, making her coffee glisten in her cup. Jason told of a client who wanted a logo like Starbucks, but not like Starbucks. I said, "Do you want something unique or a copy?" Jason rolled his eyes. And he was like, "Both." I had to spend 3 hours explaining why that wasn't possible. Avery laughed, taking a bite of her sandwich. I had a client who wanted his restaurant to look expensive but cheap. I almost lost my mind. "Oh, that's classic," Jason grinned. "Hey, you're clearly in your element. How did you even decide to come back after maternity leave?" Avery shrugged, looking into her cup. "I just got tired of just being a mom. I want to remember who I am." "I understand," Jason nodded. "My sister went through the same thing. She says maternity leave is like living in a parallel reality." "Exactly," Avery smiled, feeling that he understood her. "Sometimes I feel like I've forgotten how to be an adult." "Well, judging by your presentation, you clearly haven't forgotten." Jason raised his cup, as if clinking it. "To get back in the game." Avery smiled and picked up her cup. She loved how easy it was to talk to him. Jason didn't judge, didn't ask unnecessary questions, just listened. It was something she missed at home. When she got back to the office, there was an email from Tom. The client had approved her slides, and they wanted to meet the following week. Avery felt a surge of pride. She texted Kyle, "Clients loved my presentation." He responded half an hour later, "Cool. What time will you be home?" Avery rolled her eyes. She'd been hoping for something like, "Good job," but Kyle didn't seem to know how to be happy for her. That night, when she picked Liam up from daycare, he hugged her tightly, burying his face in her neck. "Mom, you smell like coffee," he said, and Avery laughed. "That's because I've been working like a big girl." She kissed the top of his head. "How was your day?" "We drew dinosaurs," Liam beamed. "I drew a T-Rex, and it was the biggest one." "I can't wait to see it." Avery took his hand, and they walked to the car. But even Liam's joy couldn't drown out the feeling that it was going to be cold at home. Kyle returned later than usual, carrying a folder of blueprints under his arm. He looked tired, but he still picked up Liam and twirled him around the living room. "Dad, have you seen my castle?" Liam pulled him toward the pile of blocks. "Not yet, champion," Kyle smiled. "Let's show you." Avery watched them from the stove where the pasta was heating up. She loved these moments when Kyle was with Liam, but tonight she wanted him to notice her too. She decided to try again at dinner. "Kyle, the clients really liked my presentation," she said, applying the paste. "They want me to lead the meeting next week." "That's great," Kyle nodded, but his eyes were on Liam, who was smearing sauce across his plate. "Liam, don't play with your food." Avery tightened her grip on her fork. "I just thought you'd be happy for me." "I'm glad," Kyle looked at her. I still don't understand why all this is happening. Are you sure you'll have time for everything? Work, Liam, home." "I'm managing." Avery tried to keep her voice even. "The nanny helps. I pick Liam up on time. Everything's under control." "Bye," Kyle shrugged. "But you've already been late twice this week." "Because I have projects." Avery felt irritation rise in her chest. "That's okay, Kyle. I don't sit in the office for fun." "I didn't say that." He put his fork down. "I'm just worried. Liam needs a mom, not a nanny. And I need a wife. I need to be more than just a mom." Avery raised her voice, and Liam looked at her, frozen. She immediately softened. "Liam, it's okay, eat." Kyle sighed. Let's not do this in front of him." "Then let's talk in general." She looked him in the eyes. "You act like I'm doing something wrong. I just want to work. It's normal." "Fine." Kyle tapped his fingers on the table. "But you've changed. New dresses, delays. I just want us to be on the same page." I haven't changed. Avery shook her head. I'm just trying to be me. Can't you see that? Kyle was silent, staring at his plate. Avery felt a wall growing between them. She wanted to shout so he could hear her, but instead she stood up and started clearing the dishes. Liam ran off to play, and Kyle went into his office, saying he needed to finish the blueprints. Later, after Liam had fallen asleep, Avery sat on the couch with a glass of wine. She opened her phone and saw a text from Jason. "You were a hit tonight. Clients loved it. Coffee tomorrow." She smiled but didn't reply. Instead, she scrolled through Liam's photos, trying to numb the guilt. She loved her job, she loved feeling needed, but at home, she felt like an outsider. Kyle was right about one thing she had changed, but it wasn't what he was afraid of. She just wanted herself back. Kyle Rivers sat in his home office, staring at his laptop screen. The plans for a new office building for a client were open, but his mind was elsewhere. It was almost 10 o'clock at night. Liam was asleep upstairs, and Avery was in the kitchen washing dishes after dinner. She'd been coming home later and later for the past 2 weeks, citing urgent projects at Brightwave. Her new enthusiasm, the bright dresses, and the smiles she brought home from work should have made Kyle happy, but instead, he felt a growing sense of unease in his chest. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. Avery had changed. It wasn't that she was cold, she still hugged Liam, cooked dinner, and asked about his day. But her eyes sparkled when she talked about work, about her coworkers, about someone named Jason, who was apparently her right-hand man at the office. Kyle tried to tell himself that it was okay, she was just happy to get back to work. But something was nagging at him. Yesterday, while Avery was taking a shower, her phone lit up on the kitchen counter. Kyle hadn't meant to peek, but the notification popped up. "Jason, great job today. Going to the diner tomorrow?" The heart emoji cut into his eyes. Kyle froze, staring at the screen until it went dark. He didn't open the message, but the image had been on his mind ever since. Who was Jason? Why was he texting his wife so much? And why did Avery talk about him so much? Kyle stood up and walked to the window. Outside, Capitol Hill was dark, with streetlights casting yellow spots on the sidewalk. He remembered his older brother, Nate, whose wife had left him for a coworker 5 years ago. Nate had said, "I didn't see it happen. She just stopped being mine." Kyle had blamed his brother for not noticing the change, but now he felt like he was missing something. He walked back to his desk and opened his browser. His fingers hovered over the keyboard before he typed, "Signs of a cheating marriage." The articles popped up one after another. "She's been staying late at work more often." "She's buying new clothes." She checks her phone with a smile. Kyle closed the tab, feeling the blood pounding in his temples. This was stupid. Avery wasn't like that. But doubt had already taken root. Footsteps sounded in the living room. Avery walked in, drying her hands on a towel. She was wearing an old t-shirt and leggings, her hair pulled back into a messy ponytail. But even so, she looked different. Maybe it was her posture straighter, more confident, or the small smile that never left her face. "Are you still working?" she asked, leaning against the door frame. "Yeah, gotta finish a couple of drawings." Kyle closed his laptop. "Are you tired?" "A little," Avery shrugged. Today was a crazy day. The client asked for another last-minute revision. Again, Kyle tried to keep his voice neutral. "You're often late, don't you think?" Avery frowned. "It's a job, Kyle. Sometimes you have to." "I know," he nodded, looking at her. "It's just, you used to always be home by 6. Now almost every day until 8. "So what?" Her tone became sharper. "I don't complain when you sit late at night over your drawings." "That's different." Kyle felt irritation rise in his chest. "I work so we can have everything. And you." "What about me?" Avery crossed her arms. "Working for myself, is that a crime now?" "I didn't say that." Kyle stood up, trying to keep his composure. "I'm just worried. Liam misses you, and so do I." Avery rolled her eyes. "Liam's having a great time with the nanny. And you." You just don't want me to be anything more than a housewife. It's not, Kyle said, stepping toward her. But you've changed, Ave. The new dresses, the delays, the lunches with coworkers. I'm not blind. Oh my God, Avery shook her head. Are you serious? It's just a job. I eat lunch with my coworkers because that's what normal people do. You want me to sit in the office by myself like a hermit. I want you to be honest. The words came out faster than he could think. Avery froze, her eyes narrowing. What are you implying? Nothing. Kyle turned away, feeling his throat tighten. Forget it. No, don't forget. She took a step toward him. You think I'm hiding something? Seriously, Kyle? We're family, Ave. I don't want you to grow apart. I'm not distancing myself. Her voice wavered. I'm just trying to be myself. Why can't you see that? They stood across from each other, the air between them sparkling with tension. Avery turned away first, throwing her towel on a chair. I'm going to bed. I have an early start tomorrow. Kyle watched her go and felt something inside him crumble. He didn't want to be the husband who suspected his wife of everything, but his heart told him something was wrong. He went back to his laptop and typed Private Investigator Seattle into the search engine. An hour later, he found the website of Eliza Hayes, a private investigator with good reviews. Her profile looked professional: short dark hair, stern eyes, police experience. Kyle wrote down her number and closed his laptop. He told himself it was just to reassure himself. If Avery was honest, there was nothing to be afraid of. The next day, Kyle called Eliza from work while he was waiting for a client at the office. She answered on the second ring, her voice businesslike but calm. Eliza Hayes, how can I help you? Hello, Kyle coughed, feeling awkward. I need you to follow someone, my wife. Okay, Eliza showed no surprise. Tell me the details. What's bothering you? Kyle told me about the changes in Avery, the delays, the new dresses, her perkiness, the message from Jason. He tried to speak evenly, but his voice shook. I don't want to think she's, but I need to know. I understand, Eliza paused, as if taking notes. I'll need her schedule, her work address, and a photo. Names of people she interacts with frequently. I'll start with surveillance. That usually takes a week. My services are $100 an hour, plus expenses. Kyle swallowed. It was expensive, but peace of mind was worth more. Okay, I'll send it to you today. Very well, Eliza spoke clearly. Mr. Rivers, I will find the truth, but be prepared that you may not like it. I came to you, that means I'm ready. Kyle lied, although his chest was tightening. He texted Eliza a photo of Avery, the Brightwave address, and the schedule he knew. He spent the rest of the day trying to focus on the drawings, but his thoughts kept wandering to his wife. When he got home that evening, Avery was in the kitchen, making dinner. Liam was drawing at the table, humming something about dinosaurs. Hey, Avery smiled, but her smile was tight. How's your day? Okay, Kyle put his briefcase by the door. Yours? Crazy, she stirred the sauce. The client is redoing everything again, but we're managing. With Jason, the word slipped out, and Kyle immediately regretted it. Avery froze, then turned. Yes, with Jason, and with other colleagues. What's with that tone, Kyle? No tone, he shrugged, trying to look indifferent. I was just asking. You're not just asking, she put down her spoon. If you have a problem, just tell me. I don't have any problems, I hope I don't have any. Kyle turned away, feeling how the lie burns the throat. Let's have dinner. Avery looked at him, but said nothing. They ate in silence, only Liam chattering about his drawing. Kyle looked at his wife and tried to remember the last time they had a meal without tension in the air, or even being close at all. He told himself that Eliza would find the answers, and if it was okay, he would apologize, and if it wasn't, he didn't want to think about what would happen next. Alyssa Hayes parked her gray Honda Civic across the street from Brightwave's downtown Seattle offices. Morning rain pounded the windshield, and she turned on the wipers so she could see into the building. She had a thermos of black coffee in her hand, and a camera with a long lens on the passenger seat. Alyssa, a former cop with a decade of experience, knew how to be inconspicuous. Her dark hair was pulled back into a low ponytail, and her black jacket blended into the gray of the morning. She was waiting for Avery Lindstrom, whose photo Kyle Rivers had sent 2 days earlier. Kyle was a typical client, an anxious husband torn between his desire to trust and his fear of the worst. Eliza had seen him dozens of times. Her job was simple: find the facts without emotion or judgment. Kyle gave her Avery's schedule, the office address, and mentioned Jason Keller, a colleague whose name had come up too often. Eliza had already followed Avery yesterday, but hadn't noticed anything suspicious. Today, she was going to dig deeper. At 12:10, Avery walked out of the office. Eliza recognized her immediately: tall, blonde hair in a neat bun, wearing a dark green dress under a gray coat. She looked confident but not brash, a professional returning to work after a break. Walking next to her was a man, Jason Keller, whom Eliza recognized from his LinkedIn profile. Tall, curly-haired, wearing jeans and a suit jacket, he was talking, and Avery was laughing. They headed to a cafe across the street, the same one where Kyle said she often had lunch. Eliza got out of the car, grabbed her camera bag, and followed them, keeping her distance. She took a table in the corner of the cafe, ordering espresso so as not to attract attention. Avery and Jason sat by the window, their table littered with paper cups and plates with the remains of sandwiches. Eliza aimed the camera, pretending to scroll through her phone. Click. They laughed. Jason leaned in close, pointing at something on the screen. Click. Avery touched his arm as he handed her a napkin. Click. Nothing obvious, but enough to be alarming. Eliza sipped her coffee, watching. Avery looked alive, her eyes sparkling, as if she was finally where she wanted to be. Jason was charming. Eliza noticed that right away. He joked, he was easygoing, and Avery seemed to enjoy his company. But for now, it looked like a friendly chat. Eliza snapped a few more pictures and wrote down the time: 12:35. They spent about an hour in the cafe, then returned to the office. Eliza decided to stay to catch something else. At home, Kyle tried to distract himself by playing with Liam in the living room. Their 4-year-old son was building a tower of blocks, singing something about dinosaurs. But Kyle's mind was elsewhere. Avery had been late again, texting that they had an urgent edit for a client. He'd texted back, "Okay, see you," but inside he was seething. He hated himself for being suspicious, for hiring a detective, but Jason's text with the heart emoji, her new dresses, her distance, it all added up to a disturbing picture. "Dad, look!" Liam ran up, holding the crooked tower. "It's a pterodactyl castle." "Cool, champ." Kyle forced a smile. "Where does the pterodactyl fly?" "Over there." Liam pointed to the ceiling. "It's as big as an airplane." "Cool." Kyle patted him on the head. "Go build some more." Liam ran away, and Kyle pulled out his phone. Eliza had promised a report in a couple of days, but he couldn't wait any longer. He wrote, "Any news?" The answer came quickly: "I'm watching today. I'll call you tonight." Kyle put his phone down and went into the kitchen to heat up dinner. Avery had left a casserole in the fridge, and he put it in the oven, trying not to think about where she was. But the image of her with someone else wouldn't leave his mind. Meanwhile, Avery was in the office, finishing up slides for the next day's meeting. Jason stayed with her, helping with the logo design. They sat close, looking at the screen. "If we add this font, it'll be more modern," Jason said, pointing at the screen. "But not too fancy for the client to like." "Good idea," Avery nodded. "Maybe we should remove the shadows too. The clean style will work better." "You're right," Jason smiled. "You really know this stuff." "I try," Avery said, warmed by his words. She loved how easily he praised her, how he made her work fun. At home, Kyle rarely noticed her efforts, but here she felt important. They finished around 8. Jason suggested they stop at a cafe for coffee before leaving. "One last push and we're heroes," he said with a wink. Let's go, Avery smiled, grabbing her coat. The cafe was quiet, except for the bartender wiping down the counter. They ordered coffee, and Jason began telling them about his trip to Oregon. There's a waterfall where you can stand right under the stream, he said, sipping his latte. It feels like you're in a movie. That sounds cool, Avery imagined herself there, away from the routine. Kyle and I haven't been on a trip in a while. Your husband? Jason looked at her. He's probably a busy guy. Yeah, an architect, Avery shrugged. Always drawing. Sometimes it seems like he's married to his work. Ha, I know that feeling, Jason laughed. But you seem to be coping. Work, family, it's all on you. I try, Avery smiled, but her chest hurt. She didn't want to complain, but Jason's words had touched something inside. As they said goodbye outside the cafe, Jason gave her a quick, friendly hug. But Avery took a moment longer to respond, and in that moment her lips brushed his cheek, a fleeting, almost innocent kiss. Elise, sitting in the car across the street, caught the moment. Snap! She snapped a few more pictures. Their embrace, Avery's smile, the way Jason adjusted her scarf. The next day, Eliza continued her observation. Avery and Jason were out for lunch again, sitting closer than they had the day before, their laughter louder. Eliza recorded everything, their glances, their light touches, the way Avery tucked her hair behind her ear when Jason spoke. Nothing too revealing, but enough to file a report. That evening, Eliza met Kyle at a coffee shop on the outskirts of Seattle. She placed a thin folder of photographs in front of him, Avery and Jason laughing, touching hands, that kiss on the cheek. Here's what I've got, Eliza said, her voice even. They have lunch together almost every day. They hug, they laugh. There was one kiss on the cheek, but nothing serious beyond that. It's not full-blown cheating yet. Kyle stared at the pictures, his face hardening. Avery looked happy, happier than she had at home. The kiss on the cheek, though fleeting, was like a blow. He clenched his jaw, feeling the blood pounding in his temples. That's enough, he said quietly, closing the folder. I'll handle the rest myself. Eliza raised her eyebrows. Are you sure? I can continue, collect more. No, Kyle shook his head. Thanks for your help. How much do I owe? 500 for 2 days, plus expenses. Eliza pulled out the bill. That makes 620. Kyle wrote out the check, his hand shaking slightly. Is that all? Yes, Eliza took the check and stood up. Good luck, Mr. Rivers. Kyle remained sitting, looking at the folder. Kyle Rivers sat in his office, staring at the closed folder of photos Eliza Hayes had given him. The light from his desk lamp fell on the desk, illuminating the corner of the glossy paper where a photo of Avery laughing with Jason Keller was visible. The kiss on the cheek in one of the photos was like a thorn in his heart. Kyle hadn't opened the folder since the night before, but its contents burned him inside. He told Eliza he'd figure it out himself, but now, in the quiet of his home, he had no idea what to do next. Liam's voice could be heard outside the door, humming a dinosaur song as he played in the living room. Avery was in the kitchen, making breakfast, the smell of bacon and coffee wafting into the den. Everything looked normal, but for Kyle, his world was falling apart. He loved Avery, he loved their family, but the pictures didn't lie. She was drifting away, and he couldn't just wait for her to go away. Kyle leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. He remembered their prenup, signed before they'd married, when they'd been young and in love, but pragmatic enough to protect themselves. His father, a lawyer, had insisted on an adultery clause. If one spouse could prove the other had been unfaithful, the other would lose all rights to property and alimony. It had seemed like a technicality at the time, but now Kyle saw it as leverage. He didn't want a divorce, but he needed to take back control. Avery needed to understand that their family wasn't a toy. He stood up and walked over to the filing cabinet where he kept his papers. In a metal box, among the house and insurance papers, was the contract. Kyle flipped through it, finding the clause he needed. It was in black and white. In the event of proven infidelity, All of his property would remain his, including the house and savings. He clenched his jaw, imagining Avery losing everything to someone like Jason. But the thought of Liam, without a mother, made his heart clench. He didn't want this. He wanted his wife back. Kyle walked back to his desk and opened his laptop. He created a new folder on his desktop, called it Avery, and dragged the photos from Eliza into it. He printed them out on his home printer, trying not to look at his wife's smiling face. Each photo her laugh, her hand on Jason's shoulder, that kiss felt like a blow. He filed the photos in the folder, adding a copy of the prenuptial agreement and the divorce form he'd found online. This wasn't a plan to break up the family, but a way to save it. He wanted Avery to know she'd gone too far. "Kyle, breakfast is ready." Avery's voice came from the kitchen. "I'm coming," he shouted, closing the folder. His voice sounded calmer than he felt. In the kitchen, Liam sat at the table, spreading jam on toast. Avery stood at the stove, flipping bacon. She was wearing an old t-shirt and leggings. Her hair was a mess, but Kyle noticed that she had put on lipstick. Even at home, she looked different now. "Morning, champ." Kyle sat down next to Liam, patting his head. "How's the toast?" "Delicious." Liam showed a piece of toast covered in jam. "Mom made a dinosaur." Avery laughed, setting the plate of bacon on the table. "It's not a dinosaur, it's just toast, baby." "Dinosaur." Liam pointed stubbornly at the bread. Kyle smiled, but his gaze slid to Avery. She looked happy, but he couldn't forget the photos. "Are you going into the office today?" he asked, trying to sound neutral. "Yeah." Avery poured coffee. "We have a client meeting. We need to get the final slides ready." "Late again?" Kyle took a bite of toast, looking at her. Avery frowned. "Maybe. Why do you ask?" "Just wondering," he shrugged. "Liam misses you." "I pick him up from daycare every day." Her voice grew sharper. "And the nanny helps. Everything is under control, Kyle." "I know," he nodded, but inside he was seething. "I just want us to spend more time together, like before." Avery looked at him, her gaze softening. "I want to too. Maybe we can go to the park this weekend. Liam would love it." "That's a great idea." Kyle forced a smile. But a plan was already forming in his head. He didn't want to fight, didn't want to accuse her outright. He needed something that would make her stop and think. After breakfast, Avery went to her bedroom to get ready for work. Kyle took Liam to preschool, then called the nanny, Sarah, a young student who sometimes babysat their son. "Sarah, can you pick Liam up from preschool tomorrow and babysit him for the rest of the evening?" "Of course, Mr. Rivers," Sarah replied. "Until what time?" "Let's say 8, Kyle paused. "Maybe a little later. I'll let you know." "No problem." Her voice was cheerful. "Liam is so sweet. We'll have fun." Kyle thanked her and hung up. He went home, grabbed the folder of photos and documents, and put it in his briefcase. The plan was simple. Tomorrow he would pick Avery up from work, show her the evidence, and force her to choose between their family or her new life. He didn't want a divorce, but he wanted her to understand that she was risking everything. Avery returned home around 7 that evening, her bag slung over her shoulder and a smile on her face. She looked tired but pleased. "The client approved the slides," she said, setting her bag down on the floor. "It's been a hell of a day, but it was worth it." "Good girl," Kyle nodded, helping her take off her coat. "Liam's already eaten and playing upstairs." "Thank you." Avery kissed him on the cheek and walked toward her son. Kyle watched her go, his heart aching. She was his wife, the mother of his son, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was losing her. Later, after Liam had fallen asleep, they sat on the couch with glasses of wine. Avery talked about the work, about how the client had almost missed a deadline, but her team had made it. Kyle listened with half an ear, nodding at the right places. His mind was on the next day. "You're kind of quiet." Avery looked at him. "Is everything okay?" "Yeah, just tired." Kyle shrugged. "Long day." "Tell me." She moved closer. "What's new with you?" "Nothing special." He took a sip of wine. New project, green roof. The client wants ecology, but doesn't want to pay for it. Sounds familiar, Avery laughed. We have the same thing. Everyone wants it cool, but cheap. Kyle nodded, but he didn't smile. He wanted to ask about Jason, about the cafe, about the kiss, but he held back. Tomorrow would tell. He looked at her, trying to remember her like this, smiling, with a drink in her hand. He still loved her, and that made it all the more difficult. I'll pick you up tomorrow, he said suddenly, putting the glass on the table. Avery raised her eyebrows in surprise. Why? I want to surprise you, Kyle forced a smile. Ask for an early exit, okay? A surprise, she smiled, but there was a wary look in her eyes. What are you planning? You'll see, he shrugged. Just be ready for 3. Okay, Avery looked at him, trying to guess what was on his mind. But no stupid ideas, okay? I promise, Kyle nodded, but his heart was beating faster. He didn't know how she would react tomorrow, but he was sure of one thing. He wouldn't go down without a fight. Kyle Rivers gripped the steering wheel of his black Jeep Cherokee outside Brightwave's downtown Seattle office. The rain had stopped, but the pavement glistened with moisture, and people hurried under umbrellas. It was 3 p.m. sharp, and Kyle waited for Avery, his heart pounding like he was running a marathon. In the back seat was a folder of photos from Eliza Hayes and divorce papers. He'd rehearsed the words all night, but now, as he stared at the glass doors of the office, he felt them slipping away. This was his chance to get his family back or lose them forever. Avery came out 5 minutes later, her blonde hair pulled back into a ponytail and her dark green dress flattering her figure. She spotted Kyle's car and waved, but her smile was wary. Kyle took a deep breath, trying to keep his composure. He got out of the car and opened the door for her. Hey, Avery slid into the passenger seat. What's the surprise? You were so cryptic. Get in. Kyle closed the door and got back behind the wheel. His voice was even, but inside he was seething. You'll find out soon enough. Avery frowned at him. Kyle, are you okay? You're acting kind of weird. It's okay. He started the engine and pulled out onto the road. Just buckle up. She buckled up, but her eyes never left him. Where are we going? What, a date? She tried to smile, but the tension in his posture made her wary. Not really. Kyle looked at the road, his fingers gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary. It's just, we need to talk. Talk? Avery turned to him. About what? You're scaring me. It's okay, he lied, though his throat was tight. Just grabbed the folder from the back seat. Avery hesitated, then reached back. She pulled out a thin black folder and opened it. The first thing she saw was a photograph of her and Jason in a cafe, laughing, her hand on his shoulder. Her face went pale. She flipped the page, another picture of her touching his hand. Then one of her kissed his cheek. The last were papers, a prenuptial agreement and a divorce form. Her hands shook. What? What is this? Her voice was barely audible. Kyle glanced at her, his jaw clenching. It's you, Avery, with your coworker, and our contract, in case you forgot. You hired someone to follow me? Avery looked at him, her eyes wide. Kyle, are you serious? What else could I do? His voice grew louder. You stay late every day, come in with those smiles, those new dresses. And then I see this. He nodded at the folder. You kiss him, Ave. This isn't just lunch with a coworker. It's not what you think. Avery slammed the folder shut, her voice shaking. It was just a friendly gesture. We were just talking. Friendly? Kyle chuckled, not taking his eyes off the road. Do you hug all your friends like that? Or just the ones who send you hearts and text messages? Avery froze, her cheeks flushing. Did you check my phone? I saw the notification, Kyle said, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. I didn't have to dig around to figure out what was going on. Nothing's happening, Avery raised her voice, her eyes filling with tears. Jason's just a coworker. He was helping me get used to the job. That's all. Then why didn't you tell me when I asked how your day was? You would have said you went for coffee with a colleague, hugged and kissed in a friendly way. How does that sound, don't you understand? Kyle looked at her, his voice became quieter, but firmer. Why do I find out about your friendly kisses from a detective? Avery turned to the window, her fingers clutching the folder. Because you would do what you're doing now. Blame me for everything. I'm not blaming, Kyle shook his head. I'm trying to save our family. But you forgot about us, Ave. About Liam. About me. I haven't forgotten. She turned to him, tears rolling down her cheeks. I just wanted to be myself. I wanted to feel like I was more than just a mother and a wife. How many times do I have to tell you this? Do you realize you've put everything at risk? Kyle slammed his palm on the steering wheel. Look at these papers. If this goes to divorce, you'll lose everything, the house, the money, Liam. How are you going to raise him without anything? Avery gasped, her eyes widening. Are you threatening me? Do you really think I'm cheating? What does it look like, Ave? Kyle looked at her, his voice shaking. I'm not blind. I can see how you've changed. And I'm not giving Liam up. He deserves a normal family. You're not taking him, Avery nearly screamed, her voice breaking. He's my son. Then act like his mother, Kyle lowered his voice, but each word hit like a hammer. And not like a woman who runs after a new dress and kisses from coworkers. Avery buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. She was crying, and Kyle felt a pang of guilt, but he pushed it away. He hadn't done this to hurt her. He wanted her to understand how far she'd come. The car slowed, and he pulled into the parking lot of a small building with a sign that read, Family Therapy Mira Solis. Avery looked up, wiping away tears. Where are we? Kyle turned off the engine and looked at her. This is our last chance, Ave. If you want Liam to have a full family, we have to fight. Together. A family psychologist? Her voice was hoarse from tears. You brought me to a psychologist? Yeah, Kyle nodded, his gaze hard. I don't want a divorce, but I can't live with this, he gestured to the folder. We either fix this or it's over. I'm not going to sit here and wait for you to cross that fine line. Avery looked at him, her face a mixture of pain and anger. You don't trust me. You hired a detective, Kyle. How can I go to counseling with you? Because I still love you, the words came out suddenly, and his voice shook. And I want Liam to have both of us. But you have to choose, Ave. Right now. Avery was silent, her fingers clenching the folder until the paper was crumpled. She looked at the building, then at Kyle. Tears still glistened in her eyes, but she nodded. Kyle exhaled, feeling the tension ease slightly. They got out of the car and headed to the office. Inside, they were greeted by Mira Solis, a woman in her 50s with a warm smile and calm eyes. Her office was cozy, a soft couch, a couple of plants, a box of tissues on the table. Good afternoon, Mira stood up, shaking their hands. I'm Mira. Please sit down. Avery and Kyle sat down on the couch, a few feet apart, but it felt like a chasm. Mira looked at them, her gaze attentive, but not judgmental. Tell me why you're here, she said, opening her notebook. What's bothering you? Kyle opened his mouth, but Avery spoke first, her voice shaking. My husband thinks I'm cheating on him. He hired a detective to follow me. Mira nodded, not showing surprise. And you, Kyle? What do you want to say? Kyle clenched his fists, looking at the floor. I want our family to remain a family, but I can't ignore what I see. Avery wiped away her tears, her voice quiet. I didn't cheat. I wanted to feel alive. Work was my way of coping with the emptiness. But now I don't know how to prove him wrong. Mira nodded, taking notes. Okay, let's start with how you're both feeling right now. No accusations, just your emotions. Kyle looked at Avery, her tear-stained face cutting into his heart. He wanted to believe her, but the pictures were still in his head. Avery looked at him, her eyes full of pain. They began to talk, slowly, reluctantly, but Mira guided them, asking simple questions. It was only the first step, but Kyle felt like it was the beginning either of the end or of salvation. Avery Lindstrom sat on the plush couch in Mira Solis' office, clutching a crumpled napkin. Across from her, at the other end of the couch, sat Kyle, his shoulders tense, his eyes fixed on the floor. Light from the window fell on a green plant in the corner, and the silence in the room seemed heavy as Seattle fog. Mira, with her warm smile and calm voice, sat in a chair, holding a notepad. It was their first session, and Avery was still shaking with tears and anger from the scene in the car. The pictures Kyle had shown her and Jason at the coffee shop, their laughter, her hand on his shoulder, that brief kiss on the cheek still burned into her mind. She couldn't believe Kyle had hired a detective. Her husband, the man she'd sworn she loved, was tracking her like a criminal. But the worst part was, he'd been right, she'd gone too far. Not in the cheating, no, but in the way she'd allowed herself to enjoy Jason's attention, the way she'd looked for something in him that she couldn't find at home. Avery, Mira's voice was soft but firm. You started saying in the car that work was a way for you to cope with the emptiness. Can you talk about that? Avery looked down at her hands, the napkin in them nearly torn. I don't know how to explain it. For the last 3 years, I've only been a mom. I love Liam, he's my world, but every day was the same. Dishes, daycare, dinner, bed. I felt like I was dissolving. Kyle looked up, his face hard, but with a hint of pain in his eyes. You never said you were this sick. Did you ask? Avery turned to him, her voice shaking. You'd come home, play with Liam, and I'd just be in the background. You didn't notice I was drowning. I worked, Ave. Kyle clenched his fists. I tried to make sure we had everything. The house, the garden, your new dresses. I thought you were happy. Happy? She shook her head, tears welling up again. I was invisible, Kyle. Work gave me a chance to feel like myself again. Not just a mom, but a person. Mira raised her hand, stopping them. Okay, let's pause. Kyle, can you hear what Avery is saying? She felt invisible. Can you understand that? Kyle looked at Avery, his jaw tensing. I understand, but that doesn't excuse. He hesitated. What I saw in the pictures, you were with him, Avery. You kissed him. It wasn't a kiss, Avery raised her voice, but then caught herself when she saw Mira's gaze. It was, I don't even know, a friendly gesture. We were joking. He was helping me with projects. It wasn't an affair. Then why didn't you tell me? Kyle leaned forward. You came home smiling, but not with me. With him. How was I supposed to take that? Avery opened her mouth, but the words stuck. She wanted to say that Jason was just a colleague, that his attention was a breath of air, but she realized how that sounded. Instead, she hung her head. I didn't mean to hurt you. I wanted to feel alive. Mira nodded, taking notes. Avery, you said alive. That's an important word. What does it mean to you? Avery thought, fiddling with her napkin. It's being needed, not just as a mom or a wife, but as myself. At work, I felt like my ideas mattered, that I wasn't just a shadow. Kyle turned away, looking out the window. His fingers tapped the arm of the couch. I thought you were happy with Liam and me. You're enough, Avery looked at him, her voice softening. But I can't just be you. I need something of my own. Mira looked at Kyle. Kyle, how do you feel when you hear this? He paused, his gaze heavy. I feel like I'm not needed. She found someone else who makes her happy, and I'm just the one paying the rent. That's not true, Avery shook her head, her eyes filling with tears again. You're my husband, Kyle. I love you, but I can't just be your shadow. Mira raised her hand. Okay, you both said important things. Avery, you feel like you're losing yourself. Kyle, you feel like you're losing her. That's a start. Let's try an exercise. Name one feeling you want the other to understand. Avery spoke first, her voice quiet. I want you to understand how lonely I was, even with you and Liam. Kyle looked at her, his face softening. I want you to understand how scared I am. I'm scared of losing you, Ave. Avery felt a pang in her chest. She wanted to reach out, but stopped. Instead, she nodded and Mira smiled. That's a good start, Mira said. We'll go into more detail next session. In the meantime, think about what you want to keep in your family. That's your homework. The session ended, and Kyle and Avery walked out of the office in silence. In the car, Avery stared out the window, her thoughts racing. She was angry at Kyle for not trusting him, but his words about fear had hurt her. She didn't want to lose him, but she didn't know how to prove she hadn't cheated. Kissing Jason on the cheek had been a mistake, an impulse, but to Kyle it had felt like a betrayal. Do you really think I'm cheating on you? She asked as they stopped at a traffic light. Kyle gripped the steering wheel. I don't know what to think, Ave, but I saw you with him. It didn't look like just coworkers. It was stupid, she turned to him. But it's not cheating. I didn't sleep with him, Kyle. I don't want him. Then why did you let it get this far? His voice was quiet but firm. You could have told me you were feeling bad, instead of running to him. Avery turned away, tears welling up again. I didn't know how to tell you. You wouldn't understand. Maybe I didn't, Kyle looked at her. But I would have tried. And now I don't know how to trust you. They fell silent, and the rest of the drive was spent in silence. At home, the nanny, Sarah, was waiting for them, playing with Liam in the living room. Avery hugged her son, hiding her tear-stained face. Kyle thanked Sarah and walked her to the door, then returned to the living room. Liam ran up to him with his blocks. Dad, let's build a castle, he said, beaming. Right now, champ, Kyle crouched down next to him, but his gaze slid to Avery. She was standing at the foot of the stairs, looking at them, and there was something in her eyes that Kyle hadn't seen in a long time: vulnerability. I'm going to bed, she said quietly. I'm tired. Okay, Kyle nodded without getting up. Good night. Avery went upstairs, and Kyle stayed with Liam, helping build the castle. But his thoughts were with her. Mira's session had given him hope, but the pictures were still in his head. He didn't know how to regain that trust, but he knew he wanted to try. For Liam. For them. Avery lay in her bedroom, staring at the ceiling. She felt crushed. Kyle was right, she had gone too far with Jason, even if it hadn't been an affair. She'd let herself enjoy his attention because she felt invisible at home. But now she could see how it hurt Kyle, and it was killing her. She wanted to fix it, but she didn't know where to start. Tomorrow she would talk to Jason, set boundaries. And with Kyle, she hoped Mira could help them find a way back. Avery Lindstrom sat on the same plush couch in Mira Solis' office, but this time the tension between her and Kyle was a little less. It had been a week since their first session, and though things were still awkward at home, they were trying to be civil. Avery held the herbal tea Mira had offered her, and Kyle fidgeted with his watch at her side. Outside, Seattle was bathed in the gray light of late morning, and a light rain pattered against the glass, creating a cozy backdrop for the conversation Avery was afraid to start. Mira, as always, was calm. Her dark eyes were focused on them, her notebook resting on her lap. Last week, you both shared your feelings, she began, her voice soft but firm. Avery, you talked about emptiness. Kyle, you talked about the fear of losing your family. Today, I want to dig deeper. Avery, can you tell me where this emptiness came from? What created it? Avery looked down at the cup, her fingers tightening on the warm ceramic. She knew Mira wanted honesty, but the words stuck in her throat. The last week had been hard. At home, she and Kyle had talked only about mundane things: Liam, daycare, bills. But the photos he'd shown her in the car, his accusations, still hung between them. She wanted to explain, but she was afraid he wouldn't understand. Avery took a sip of tea to buy herself time. It didn't start right away. When Liam was born, I was happy. I really was. But then the days became the same. I'd get up, feed him, go for a walk, clean, cook. and every day I felt like I was losing a piece of myself. Kyle looked at her, his brow furrowed. You never said it was this hard for you. Because I didn't want to complain, Avery turned to him, her voice shaking. You'd come home, play with Liam, and I'd just be there. I didn't want to be that wife who whines about how bad she's feeling. But I was feeling bad, Kyle. Mira nodded, making a note. Avery, you said losing a piece of myself. Can you remember the moment when that feeling became the strongest? Avery closed her eyes, her thoughts racing back. When Liam was 2, I went to a high school reunion. All my friends from college were talking about their careers, their trips, their lives. And all I could talk about was how Liam learned to count to 10. I felt like nobody, like I'd disappeared. Kyle opened his mouth, but Mira stopped him with a small gesture. Let her finish, Kyle. Avery, continue. Avery swallowed, her fingers tightening around her cup. I remembered my father leaving when I was a baby. He told my mother she was becoming a tired housewife, that he wanted someone alive, someone interesting. I was always afraid I'd be like that. When I went back to work, I felt like I belonged again. Not just as a mom, but as a woman who mattered. Kyle froze, his eyes widening. You never told me about your father. Why? Because it hurt. Avery looked at him, her voice breaking. I didn't want you to think I was comparing you to him. But that fear, it's always been there. I was afraid you'd look at me and only see Liam's mom and not me. Kyle looked down, his fingers stopping fiddling with the strap of his watch. I never thought of you that way. You were always, Avery, my Avery. But you didn't show it, she shook her head. You came home, talked about work, about Liam, and I wanted you to see me, not just as a wife, but as a person. Mira looked at Kyle. Kyle, do you hear what Avery is saying? She was afraid of becoming invisible to you. Can you understand that? Kyle nodded, but his face was tense. I understand, but that doesn't excuse what happened with Jason. You were looking for attention from him, Ave, not from me. Avery felt tears welling up. It wasn't about him. He was just there. He listened, complimented my work. It was what I missed at home. You could have told me, Kyle looked at her, his voice quieter. I would have tried, but instead you ran around the cafe with him, kissing him. It wasn't a kiss, Avery raised her voice, but then caught herself when she saw Mira's gaze. It was a mistake. I didn't mean for it to go that far. I was lonely, Kyle. Mira raised her hand, stopping them. Okay, you both said something important. Avery, you shared your fear of becoming invisible. Kyle, you felt like she was seeking attention from someone else. Let's try to understand where your fear comes from, Kyle. What makes you afraid of losing her? Kyle paused, his gaze sliding to the window. The rain was falling harder, the patter of drops growing louder. My brother Nate, he said finally. His wife left him for a coworker 5 years ago. I watched him fall apart. He said he didn't notice how distant she was. I swore to myself I wouldn't let that happen to us. But when I saw those pictures, he clenched his fists. I felt like I was losing you, Ave, and I didn't know how to stop it. Avery looked at him, her heart clenching. She knew about Nate, but Kyle rarely spoke of him. You never told me how it affected you, she said quietly. Because I didn't want to be weak, Kyle shrugged. I thought if I was strong and provided for us, everything would be okay. But then you started changing, and I panicked. Mira nodded, her pen hovering over her notebook. This is an important point. You both carry fears that you haven't spoken about. Avery's afraid of becoming invisible, Kyle's afraid of losing his family. These fears have driven you to do things that have hurt others. What do you think you can do to start listening to each other? Avery considered, her fingers fiddling with the edge of her napkin. I could have been more honest, telling you I felt bad instead of running off to work. Kyle looked at her, his gaze softening. I could ask, not just about Liam, but about you, about how you feel. Okay, Mira smiled. That's already a step. I want to give you homework. Write each other a letter. Not about what makes you angry, but about what you expect from your family. What you want to keep or get back. Bring the letters to the next session. Avery and Kyle nodded, though they both looked unsure. The session ended, and they walked out of the office in silence. It was still raining, and Kyle opened his umbrella, shielding Avery. She looked at him, feeling a warmth in her chest. He still cared, despite everything. They were silent in the car, but the silence wasn't as heavy as it had been a week ago. Avery stared out the window, thinking about the letter. She wanted to write that she missed their old evenings, laughing at movies and planning the future. But she knew she had to be honest about her fear, too, about how she was afraid of becoming that tired housewife. They were met at home by Liam, who was drawing at the kitchen table under the supervision of Nanny Sarah. "Mom, Dad," he ran up, hugging their legs. "I drew a dinosaur." "Cool, kid." Avery crouched down, examining the drawing. "Is that a T-Rex?" "No, Triceratops." Liam pointed at the horns. "He's the strongest." Kyle smiled, but his gaze slid to Avery. "I'll go make dinner," he said, taking off his coat. "Sarah, thanks for sitting." "No problem," Sarah smiled, packing her backpack. Liam was an angel. After Sarah left, Avery helped Liam gather up the pencils while Kyle began to make the paste. They worked in silence, but there was something new in the silence, not hostility, but cautious hope. Avery knew there was more to come work, but Kyle's words about his brother and his fear brought him closer. She wanted him to understand her fear, but now she saw that he was afraid too. Later, after Liam had fallen asleep, Avery sat at the kitchen table with her laptop to start writing. Instead, she just stared at the screen, thinking about how things had gotten this bad. She knew she had to talk to Jason, set clear boundaries, but most importantly, she had to be honest with Kyle. Avery Lindstrom sat in a coffee shop across the street from the Brightwave office, nervously fiddling with the rim of her paper coffee cup. Across from her sat Jason Keller, his dark curls slightly tousled by the morning breeze, his eyes as bright as ever with a small smile. They had just finished discussing final edits for a client, but Avery asked him to stay. She needed to say something she had been putting off all week since her session with Mira Solis. Her heart was pounding, but she knew she had to. "You seem a little thoughtful today." Jason leaned back in his chair, sipping his espresso. "Everything okay?" Avery forced a smile, but her fingers tightened around the cup. "Yeah, it's just, I need to tell you something." "That sounds serious." He raised his eyebrows, but his tone remained light. "Spit it out." She took a deep breath, looking at the table. "Jason, you've been a great colleague. You've helped me fit in, and I appreciate that. But we need to set boundaries. I don't want anything to happen between us that might look wrong." Jason frowned, his smile fading. "Wait, what are you talking about? Did I do something wrong?" "No." Avery quickly shook her head. "This isn't about you. This is about me. I got too carried away. Our dinners, our conversations, that time she hesitated, kissed you on the cheek. It was a mistake." Jason looked at her, his gaze growing serious. "Avery, I didn't think it was anything serious. We were just chatting, joking. I didn't mean to set you up." "I know," she said, looking him in the eye. "But it was different for my husband, and I understand why. I want to keep my family together, Jason. That's why I'm leaving Brightwave." "Leaving?" He leaned forward, his voice growing louder. "Ave, are you serious? You're just starting out. You're in your element. The clients love you." "This isn't about work." Avery shook her head. "I love her, but my family is more important. I've gone too far, and I need to fix it." Jason leaned back, rubbing the back of his head. "Look, I didn't mean to make this difficult. If I've gone too far, just tell me and I'll back off." "You didn't overdo it," Avery smiled weakly. "It was me. I allowed myself to look for what I was missing at home in you. But it wasn't fair to you or Kyle." He nodded, his gaze softening. "I understand. But are you sure leaving is the answer? maybe just less coffee with me. Avery laughed, but it was bitter. No, I need a fresh start. For myself and for my family. Okay, Jason shrugged, but there was a hint of sadness in his voice. You're awesome, Avery. Brightwave will miss you if you change your mind. Thank you, she stood up, holding out her hand. No hard feelings. No hard feelings, he shook her hand, his smile returning but not as bright. Good luck to you. Avery walked out of the cafe feeling a little lighter. She had sent her resignation letter to Tom, her boss, that morning, explaining that a family emergency required her attention. Tom had been disappointed, but had wished her luck. Now, as she walked to her car, Avery felt both lighter and heavier. She had taken a step back from her job, but she wasn't sure it would bring Kyle back. At home, Kyle was making dinner while Liam was drawing at the kitchen table. Avery walked in, taking off her coat, and her gaze fell on her son. His curly hair was falling over his forehead, and his tongue was hanging out in effort as he drew the dinosaur. Mom, Liam ran up, hugging her. I drew a stegosaurus. Cool, baby. Avery kissed the top of his head. Will you show me? Aha. He dragged her to the table where there was a sheet of paper with a green dinosaur. Kyle turned away from the stove, drying his hands on a towel. You're early, he said, his voice neutral but his eyes wary. Yeah, Avery nodded, sitting down next to Liam. I quit Brightwave. Kyle froze, his eyebrows raised. Quitted? Why? Avery looked at Liam, who was intently finishing the dinosaur's tail. I talked to Jason. I told him we needed to set boundaries, and I realized that work. It was taking me away from us too much. I want to fix that. Kyle looked at her, his face unreadable. So you just left? After all you said about how you needed a job? I'm not saying I won't work. Avery lowered her voice so Liam wouldn't hear. But I want to find something that won't complicate things. I want us to be on the same page, Kyle. He nodded, but his gaze remained wary. Is it because of the photographs? Partly, Avery sighed. I didn't want you to think I was cheating, but I understand why you would think that. I went too far with Jason. It was a mistake. Kyle turned away, stirring sauce on the stove. Mistake, he repeated quietly. Now what? You think quitting will fix it? No, Avery shook her head. But it's a start. I want to be honest with you, like last session with Mira. Kyle looked at her, his eyes narrowing. Honest? Does that mean you won't be running around the cafe with your coworkers anymore? Kyle, her voice grew firmer. I'm trying, but I need you to try too. You can't be suspicious of me forever. He was silent, looking at the frying pan. Liam ran up to him, showing him the drawing. Dad, look, a stegosaurus. Cool, champ, Kyle smiled, but it was a strange smile. Go finish drawing. I'm going to finish dinner now. Liam ran off, and Avery stood up, walking toward Kyle. I'm serious, she said quietly. I want this to work, but we need to work together. I know, Kyle nodded, but his voice was reserved. I need time. Avery felt a twinge of disappointment, but nodded. Okay, time. Dinner was quiet, with Liam babbling about dinosaurs. Avery tried to keep the conversation going, but Kyle gave monosyllables. She could tell he still didn't trust her, and it hurt. After dinner, she put Liam to bed, reading him a book about a pterodactyl until he fell asleep cuddling a stuffed dinosaur. Kyle sat in the living room, watching the Seahawks game on TV. Avery sat next to him, holding 2 glasses of wine. Peace? She asked, handing him one. He took the glass, but didn't smile. I'm trying, Ave, but it's hard. I can still see those pictures. I know, she looked at him, her voice soft. And I'm sorry, but I quit, Kyle. I want you to see that I chose us. Kyle took a sip of wine, his gaze softening. I see, but I need more than words. I want to believe you, but it's not that easy. I understand, Avery nodded. Let's try to be more honest. Both of us. Say what's bothering us instead of keeping quiet. Okay, Kyle looked at her. But no secrets, Ave. I don't want to guess what's going on again. No secrets, she extended her hand, and he shook it reluctantly. His hand was warm, but his grip was weak, as if he was still keeping his distance. Later, lying in the darkness of her bedroom, Avery thought about the letter Mira had asked her to write. She wanted to write that she missed their closeness, their laughter, fair about the way Kyle looked at her when they first started dating. But she knew she had to be honest about her mistakes, too. She'd let Jason get too close, and that was her fault. Now she wanted Kyle back, but she knew it would take time. Kyle lay next to her, but he didn't touch her. He stared at the ceiling, thinking about her words. Leaving her was a step, but he could still see her with Jason in the cafe, her smile, her kiss. He wanted to believe that she chose them, but the fear that she would distance herself again did not let go. Tomorrow at Mira's, he would try to be more honest like she asked. But for now, he was not ready to let go of the pain. Avery Lindstrom stood outside the preschool, holding Liam's hand. The cold Seattle wind whipped her scarf around her neck, and Liam, wearing his blue jacket with a dinosaur on the back, bounced up and down, humming a song. It had been a week since Avery quit Brightwave and talked to Jason, and while the tension between her and Kyle at home hadn't disappeared, it had softened, as if they were both carefully finding their way back to each other. They had agreed to pick Liam up from preschool together today, and Avery hoped it would be a small step toward normalcy. Mom, we made dinosaurs today. Liam tugged at her hand, beaming. Mine was a triceratops with 3 horns. Cool, kid, Avery smiled, crouching down next to him. Will you show me around the house? Yeah, he nodded, his curls bouncing. Will Dad come? He will. Avery looked out at the parking lot where Kyle would show up. Her heart sank with a mixture of hope and apprehension. Kyle had become a little less cold after their last session with Mira, where they had revealed their fears, but his wariness was still palpable. He hadn't mentioned the photos anymore, but Avery could tell he didn't trust her completely. Kyle's black Jeep pulled up a few minutes later. He got out, tall, wearing a dark coat, with a light stubble that made him look older. Liam lunged at him, shouting, Daddy! Kyle grabbed him, spinning him around. So, champ, how's your day? Kyle smiled, but his gaze slid to Avery. We made dinosaurs. Liam beamed. My coolest one, I'm sure. Kyle set him down and looked at Avery. Hi. Hey, she smiled, trying to hide her awkwardness. Ready for a family trip home? Yeah, he nodded, opening the back door for Liam. Let's go. In the car, Liam chatted about daycare while Avery and Kyle listened, exchanging short sentences. It was the first thing they had done together in weeks, and Avery felt it was important. At home, they decided to cook dinner together, a simple pizza, which Liam loved. Kyle rolled out the dough and Avery chopped the tomatoes while Liam laid out the cheese, humming. Dad, add more cheese. Liam pointed at the pizza. More? Kyle pretended to be surprised. You want a cheese volcano? Yeah, Liam laughed and Avery couldn't help but smile as she looked at them. It was like the old days when they could just laugh together. While the pizza was baking, Kyle opened a bottle of beer and Avery poured herself a water. They sat down at the table and Liam began to tell how his triceratops beat everyone in kindergarten. He was the strongest. Liam waved his arms, like a superhero. A dinosaur superhero, Kyle nodded. We should draw one for Dad's office. Avery looked at Kyle, feeling warm. He was a good father, and it reminded her why she loved him so much. But when Liam ran off to get some crayons, the silence returned, and Avery decided to give it a try. Kyle, she began, looking down at her glass. I know you're still angry, but I want us to try, being closer. He looked at her, his gaze wary. I'm not angry, Ave. I don't know how to go back to the way things were. Me too, she nodded, but I want to try. I set boundaries with Jason. I'm trying to be honest. Kyle took a sip of his beer, his fingers tapping the bottle. I can see you're trying. but it's hard for me to forget those pictures. I can still see you with him." Avery pressed her lips together, feeling a stab of pain. "I know, and I'm sorry, but I don't want this to define us. We can start over if you give me a chance." He paused, looking at her. "I want to give you a chance, but I need you to be honest. If you need something, say it. Don't run to someone else." "I didn't run," her voice wavered. "But I promise, Kyle, I'll talk if I'm feeling bad. And you, can you ask? Not just about Liam, but about me." Kyle nodded, his face softening. "Okay, I'll try." Liam returned with pencils, and the conversation stopped. They finished their pizza, laughing about how Liam had drawn a dinosaur with wings. Later, after Avery had put her son to bed, she went down to the living room where Kyle was watching the news. She sat down next to him, holding 2 letters, their homework from Mira. "I wrote mine," she said, holding out the sheet. "Do you want to read it?" Kyle took the letter, his eyebrows raised. "Are you serious?" "Yes," Avery nodded. "I want you to know what I expect from our family." He unfolded the paper and began to read. Avery wrote about how she missed their evenings when they could talk about anything, about how she wanted Kyle to see her not just as Liam's mother, but as the woman he loved. She wrote about her fear of being invisible and how her work made her feel alive, but she knew she had gone too far. Kyle finished reading and looked at her. "That's honest," he said quietly. "I didn't know you were that scared." "And your letter?" Avery looked at him, her heart beating faster. Kyle pulled a folded piece of paper out of his pocket. "I wrote one too." He held it out, his hand shaking slightly. "Don't laugh." Avery took the letter and began to read. Kyle wrote about how he was afraid of losing his family, how he had seen what had happened to his brother, and how it had affected him. He wrote that he wanted Liam to grow up with both of them, and that he was willing to work on himself if she was honest. Avery felt tears welling up, but she held them back. "Thank you," she said, looking at him. "That means a lot." "I'm serious, Ave." Kyle looked into her eyes. "I want this to work, but I need time." "I understand," she nodded. "Let's just take baby steps." "Small steps," he agreed, and for the first time in weeks, his smile was genuine. At Mira's next session, they discussed the letters. Mira listened, nodding, as Avery explained how she feared Kyle would lose interest in her, and he admitted that his control was an attempt to protect the family. "You both took a big step by sharing this," Mira said, her voice warm. "Now let's try to cement it. How about setting aside time just for the two of you? One night a week, no Liam, no work, just you." Avery and Kyle exchanged glances. "We could try," Avery said. "Maybe dinner out?" "Or at home," Kyle shrugged. "No phones, no distractions." "That's a great idea," Mira smiled. "Start small. Just be together." At home, they agreed that Friday would be their night. Avery offered to cook something special, and Kyle volunteered to help. After Liam fell asleep, they sat around the table with a bottle of wine and the steaks Kyle had grilled. The conversation was cautious about Liam's childhood, about old movies they loved. Avery sensed that these weren't the same passionate evenings they had before, but it was a start. "Remember how we watched Star Wars until the morning?" Avery smiled, sipping wine. "Yeah," Kyle chuckled. "You fell asleep on the couch while I was trying to explain to you who Yoda is." They laughed, and for a moment everything was like before. But when Avery touched his hand, Kyle tensed slightly. He didn't pull away, but she sensed that the trust was still fragile. She pulled her hand away, but smiled. "Small steps," she said quietly. "Small steps," Kyle nodded, hope flickering in his eyes. Avery Lindstrom stood at the table in their kitchen, setting out plates for dinner. The aroma of her mom's lasagna filling the house mingled with the scent of freshly brewed coffee. Outside, Seattle was in the gloom of evening, and the streetlights had already come on, casting a soft glow on the wet pavement. Liam was in the living room, building another block castle and humming a song about dinosaurs. Kyle was due home from work in half an hour, and Avery felt a little nervous. Tonight was their second night without Liam, and she hoped it would go better than the first, when they were both too cautious to really relax. It had been a week since their last session with Mira Solis, where they had exchanged letters and agreed to make time for each other. The first night, last Friday, had been awkward. They'd eaten steaks, talked about small things, but Kyle was still keeping his distance and Avery was afraid to say the wrong thing. But the small steps they'd agreed on were starting to pay off. Kyle had started asking more about her day, and she'd been trying to be open, even if that meant talking about her fears. Tonight, she wanted to do something special, to remind him of who they used to be. Avery pulled the candles out of the closet that they hadn't lit since their anniversary 3 years ago and set them on the table. She put on a simple black dress, not the new one she'd bought for work, but the one Kyle had loved when they'd first started dating. She left her hair down, curling the ends slightly. She smiled at her reflection in the mirror for the first time in a long time. She felt like a woman as well as a mom. Kyle walked into the house, shaking rain off his coat. Liam immediately ran up to him, waving the cube. "Dad, look, I made a pterodactyl tower." "Seriously?" Kyle smiled, picking up his son. "That's a real skyscraper." "Yeah," Liam beamed. "Are you going to play?" "Later, champ." Kyle set him down and looked at Avery, who was standing by the table. His gaze lingered on her, and she noticed the slight sparkle in his eyes. "You look beautiful." "Thank you," Avery smiled, feeling warmth in her chest. "Dinner's almost ready. Sarah will be picking up Liam soon." Kyle nodded, taking off his coat. "Smells great. Lasagna." "Your favorite." She turned to the oven, hiding her smile. "I hope I didn't ruin it." "You never screw up." Kyle stepped closer, his voice softer than usual. "Want me to help with anything?" "You can chop up the salad," Avery said, gesturing toward the bowl of vegetables. "Just not like last time, where half of it ended up on the floor." Kyle laughed, and the sound was like a bomb. It was a strategic diversion to get Liam to eat more carrots. They worked side by side as Liam ran around talking about his pterodactyl. When Sarah, the nanny, came to pick Liam up, he hugged his parents and walked away holding her hand, carrying a backpack full of toys. Avery lit the candles, and she and Kyle sat down at the table. The lasagna was hot, the wine was cool, and for the first time in months, the atmosphere felt almost light. "Not bad." Kyle took a bite of lasagna, nodding. "You've outdone yourself." "I tried," Avery smiled, sipping her wine. "I remember you ordering that lasagna at a restaurant when we first started dating. I thought you were just trying to impress me." "And it worked," Kyle grinned, his eyes glittering. "You ate half my portion then." "Because you ordered too much," Avery laughed, and for a moment everything was like before light, alive. But then Kyle put his fork down, his eyes growing serious. "Ave, I was thinking about what you said at Mira's, about how you were afraid of becoming invisible. I don't want you to feel that way." Avery looked at him, her heart clenching. "Thank you. I was thinking about your letter, too, about how afraid you were of losing us. I don't want you to be that afraid, Kyle." He nodded, but his fingers tapped against his glass. "I'm trying to trust you, but sometimes I still see those pictures, and it's hard." Avery looked down, feeling a pang of guilt. "I know, and I'm sorry about it. I didn't mean to hurt you." "I believe," Kyle looked at her, his voice quiet, "but I need something to move on, something of ours." Avery considered, her fingers fiddling with the edge of the tablecloth. "Maybe we should try something new, together, as a hobby or, I don't know, a class?" Kyle raised his eyebrows, his face brightening. "Hobbies? Like dancing, like you wanted to do in college?" "Oh no," Avery laughed. "I was terrible at dancing. Remember when I stepped on your foot at that party?" "How can I forget?" Kyle chuckled. "I still have the scar." They laughed, and the tension eased a little. "Maybe something more relaxed," Avery suggested. Like ceramics, I saw an ad for a class downtown. We could try that. Ceramics, Kyle thought, sounds weird, but why not? If I make a crooked vase, don't laugh. I promise, Avery smiled, feeling warm. It was the first idea they had that belonged only to the two of them. The next day, they signed up for a pottery class at a local studio. The first class was on Saturday, and Avery and Kyle left Liam with his grandmother. The studio was cozy, with long tables piled high with clay and a damp smell. The teacher, an older woman named Ruth, explained the basics, and soon she and Kyle were sitting at a pottery wheel, trying to shape a lump of clay into something resembling a bowl. It's harder than it looks, Kyle frowned as his clay smeared around. How do you do it? Patience, Avery smiled, even though her own cup looked like a lopsided pancake. And don't push so hard. Kyle laughed as his clay splashed onto his shirt. Great, now I'm all dirty. You look like an artist, Avery winked, and he rolled his eyes but smiled. They laughed, covering each other in clay, and Avery felt something warm and familiar flow between them. It was the first crush they had shared in years, and it reminded her why she had fallen in love with Kyle in the first place, his ability to laugh at himself, his stubbornness, his warmth. But at Mira's next session, Avery noticed that Kyle was still wary. When Mira asked how their evening had gone, Avery told him about the lasagna and the ceramics idea, but Kyle added, "That was great, but I noticed you were checking your phone when you thought I wasn't looking." Avery froze, her cheeks flushing. "It was just a client," she said quickly. "I'm looking for remote work, sent out a couple resumes." "You didn't say," Kyle looked at her, his voice even, but a shadow of suspicion flickered in his eyes. "I was going to," Avery clasped her hands. "It's just not decided yet. I wanted to find something suitable first." Mira nodded, her gaze attentive. "Kyle, why does this bother you?" "Because I don't want to guess again," he turned to Avery. "You promised to be honest. If you're looking for a job, say so. Don't hide it." Avery nodded, feeling a pang of guilt. "You're right, I should have told you. I was just afraid you'd think I was running from my family again." "I don't want to think that," Kyle looked at her, his voice softening. "But I need to know you're with me." "I'm with you," Avery touched his hand, and this time he didn't pull away. "I promise to talk about everything." Mira smiled. "That's progress. Kyle, can you help Avery feel open? To ask without judgment." "I'll try," Kyle nodded, "but I need time too." "Time is normal," Mira closed her notebook. "Continue with your evenings and ceramics. This is your space." Avery Lindstrom sat in Mira Solis' office, her fingers fiddling nervously with the hem of her sweater. Across from her on the familiar couch, Kyle Rivers stared out the window, where the gray Seattle rain streaked the glass. This was their fifth session, and though the tension between them had eased, Avery felt like they were still walking a fine line. Their evenings together and their ceramics classes had brought them closer, but the shadow of the photos of Jason still hung over Kyle. Mira had suggested a new exercise today, and Avery was afraid it would open up old wounds. Mira, as always, radiated calm. Her dark hair was pulled back into a neat bun, and she held a notepad in her hands. "We've made a lot of progress," she began, her voice soft but confident. "You've both become more honest, you've started spending time together. Today, I want to try something new. It's a role-playing game. You switch places and talk about your fears from each other's perspectives. Avery, we'll start with you. Pretend you're Kyle. How does he feel?" Avery froze, her eyes sliding to Kyle. He was looking at her, his brow furrowed slightly, but he nodded, as if giving permission. She took a deep breath, trying to compose herself. "Okay, I'm Kyle. I'm scared I'm going to lose my family. I saw it happen to my brother, and it killed me. I work every day to make sure we have everything: a house, a daycare, a future for Liam. But when Avery went back to work, she changed. She became distant, and I caught her smiling at someone else. I feel like I can't hold her back, and it scares the crap out of me." Kyle looked at her, his face softening but his eyes flashing with pain. "That's pretty accurate," he said quietly. Mira nodded. "Great, Avery. Kyle, now you. Pretend you're Avery. How does she feel?" Kyle cleared his throat, his fingers tightening on the arm of the couch. "I'm Avery. I love Liam and Kyle, but I feel like I'm disappearing. Every day is dishes, daycare, dinner, and I'm losing myself. I went to work to feel alive again, to have someone see me as more than just my mom. But now I see how it hurt Kyle, and I feel guilty. I want him to see me, but I'm afraid he'll never understand." Avery felt tears welling up. She hadn't expected Kyle to describe her feelings so accurately. It's true," she whispered, wiping her eyes. Mira smiled, her gaze warm. "It's a powerful exercise because it helps you see each other. Avery, how did you feel when Kyle spoke for you?" "I felt like he could hear me." Avery looked at Kyle, her voice shaking. "I didn't think you understood how lonely I was." Kyle nodded, his gaze softening. "I didn't think you understood my fear so well. I didn't want to control you, Ave. I just didn't know how to hold you." Mira made a note. "This is a breakthrough. You're both starting to see how your fears have driven you to do things that hurt the other. Avery, you were finding yourself in your work, but it alienated you from Kyle. Kyle, you were trying to protect your family, but it felt controlling. How can you help each other move forward?" Avery thought about it, her fingers stopping fiddling with her sweater. "I can be more honest. Talk about when I'm feeling down instead of keeping it all bottled up. And I want Kyle to ask without thinking I'm going to do something wrong again." Kyle looked at her, his face serious. "I can ask. And I want to believe you, Eve. But I need you to not hide. If you want something of your own, say it. We'll find a way." "Okay," Mira nodded. "This is your new agreement. Honesty and openness. How about continuing your evenings and ceramics? This is your shared space." "Ceramics are fun," Avery smiled weakly at Kyle, "even if your vases look like crooked plates." Kyle chuckled for the first time this session. "Yours look like they're from kindergarten." Mira laughed. "That's a good sign. Laughter is a bridge. Keep building it." The session ended, and Avery and Kyle walked out of the office, holding hands for the first time in weeks. It was unconscious Kyle reached out as they stepped into the rain, and Avery squeezed his fingers. They didn't speak, but the touch felt like a promise. Liam was waiting for them at home, playing with their nanny Sarah. He ran up to them, hugging them. "Mom, Dad, I made a dinosaur out of Play-Doh." "Cool, kid." Avery crouched down, eyeing the green triceratops. "He's a champion antler." Kyle smiled at them. "I'll go to warm up for dinner," he said, heading for the kitchen. "Sarah, thanks for sitting with me." "No problem." Sarah packed her backpack and left, waving at Liam. Avery helped Liam clean up the Play-Doh, and Kyle warmed up the casserole she'd left in the fridge. Over dinner, they chatted about small things about daycare, about Kyle's new project, about how Liam wanted a dinosaur for his birthday. For the first time in a long time, the conversation was light, without subtext. After dinner, when Liam had fallen asleep, Avery and Kyle sat in the living room with glasses of wine. Avery looked at him, feeling warmth spreading in her chest. "Today was good," she said quietly. "Mira's, I didn't think you understood me so well." Kyle nodded, his gaze soft. "I didn't think you could see my fear either. I always thought I had to be strong to keep us together." "You don't have to be strong alone." Avery touched his arm. "We can be strong together." Kyle looked at her hand, then at her. "I want this, Ave, but I'm still scared. Not like before, but still." "I know," she nodded. "Me too. But we can try, right?" "Yes." Kyle squeezed her hand, and for the first time in months, his touch was warm, confident. They sat in silence, watching the flickering TV screen as an old movie played. Avery rested her head on Kyle's shoulder, and he didn't pull away. It was a small moment, but it felt like a victory. Later, when they were putting Liam to bed, Kyle helped her tuck him in, and their hands touched. Avery looked at him, and he smiled a real smile, not a fake one. With a forced smile. "Good night, champion." Kyle kissed Liam on the forehead. "Good night, Dad," Liam muttered, already falling asleep. Avery and Kyle left the room, closing the door. In the hallway, she turned to him. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for trying." "You too." Kyle looked into her eyes. "We'll get through this, Ave." Avery Lindstrom sat at the kitchen table in their Capitol Hill home, scrolling through her laptop. Morning light streamed through the window, illuminating her face as she scrolled through the freelance job board. It had been 2 weeks since their breakthrough session with Mira Solis, where she and Kyle had switched roles and truly seen each other's fears for the first time. Something had changed since then, not dramatically, but noticeably. Kyle had become softer, asking more about her day, and she had tried to be open, even when it was hard. Their evenings together and pottery classes had become little pockets of warmth, and Avery felt like they were slowly coming back to each other. Liam was sitting on the living room floor, building another tower of blocks, singing about dinosaurs. His curly hair fell into his eyes, and Avery smiled at him. She'd found an opening, a remote marketing job for a small company that was looking for a branding specialist. It was perfect. Flexible hours, working from home, the ability to balance family and career. Avery sent in her resume, feeling a surge of hope. She wanted to prove to Kyle that she could be herself without losing them. Kyle walked into the kitchen, holding a mug of coffee. He was wearing jeans and an old t-shirt, ready for their Saturday pottery class. "Morning," he said, sitting down across from her. "What are you looking for?" "A job." Avery looked at him, waiting for a reaction. "Remote. Found one. Looks like it might work." Kyle nodded, his gaze attentive but not judgmental. "Tell me." She exhaled, feeling relieved. "It's marketing for a startup. They want to refresh the brand. They need someone with experience. I sent my resume, but I'm still waiting for a response." "Cool." Kyle took a sip of coffee. "Remote is good. You can be with Liam." "Yeah," Avery smiled. "I don't want to go back to the way things were. I want to find balance." Kyle looked at her, his eyes softening. "I can see you're trying, Ave. And I want you to have what makes you happy." "Thank you." She touched his hand, and he didn't pull away. "And you? How's your green roof project going?" "The client still wants everything at once," Kyle chuckled. "But I can handle it. I might even give you a discount if you want an office for your startup." Avery laughed, and the sound was like a bridge between them. "Deal. But first, I have to get this job." Liam ran up, holding the crooked tower. "Mom, Dad, look. It's a castle for a stegosaurus." "Wow, champ." Kyle crouched down next to him. "That's a fortress." "Yeah," Liam beamed. "Let's go play." "Soon, baby." Avery patted his head. "Daddy and I are going to pottery, and you're going with Grandma. Okay?" Liam nodded, but his face became more serious. "Will you come back?" "Of course." Kyle picked him up, spinning him around. "We always come back." Avery looked at them, feeling a warmth in her chest. These moments, Kyle and Liam, their laughter, their shared plans reminded her of why she fought for their family. In ceramics class, she and Kyle laughed again as they splattered clay on each other. Avery made a lopsided bowl, and Kyle made something that resembled a pitcher. Their teacher, Ruth, praised their efforts, and they left the studio holding hands, clay under their fingernails. At Mira's next session, Avery told her about the job opening, and Kyle shared how he was helping her with her schedule so she could work from home. Mira nodded, her eyes warm. "You found a balance," she said, closing her notebook. "That's a big step. But let's talk about the future. What do you want for your family in a year?" Avery looked at Kyle, her heart beating faster. "I want us to be closer, so that Liam can grow with both of us, and I can work without losing us." Kyle nodded, his voice firm. "I want the same thing. And I want you to feel like yourself, Ave, without fear. Mira smiled. That's a wonderful goal. Continue your evenings and your ceramics. And think about something bigger, maybe a vacation. Avery and Kyle exchanged glances. Vacation? Avery raised her eyebrows. We haven't been on vacation since Liam was born. Then it's about time, Kyle smiled, his eyes twinkling. Hawaii? You've always wanted to go there. Really? Avery felt her face light up. That would be incredible. It's decided, Kyle squeezed her hand. Let's leave Liam with Grandma and go. Mira nodded. That's a great plan. This will be your time to remember why you're together. Back home, they started planning a vacation. Avery found a website for a bungalow in Maui, and Kyle suggested a week without phones, just them and the ocean. That night, after Liam had fallen asleep, Avery sat on the couch, flipping through pictures of beaches. Kyle sat next to her, holding 2 glasses of wine. Are you packing your bags already? He winked, handing her a glass. Almost, Avery smiled. What should I get? Dresses? A bathing suit? Kyle looked at her, his gaze warm, almost like old times. Just yourself, Ave. You won't need any clothes. Avery laughed, her cheeks flushing. Kyle Rivers, you are incorrigible. I try, he chuckled, and they clinked glasses. Laughter filled the living room, and Avery felt the last few months the pain, the suspicion, the fear fading into the background. They weren't gone, but they were quieter, like waves retreating from the shore. Later, when they were in bed, Kyle put his arm around her, and Avery snuggled into him, feeling his warmth. Thank you, she whispered, for not giving up. You too, Kyle kissed the top of her head. We'll get through this, Ave. She nodded, closing her eyes. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.